Grams, it doesn't look like he's breathing. She said, because he's not. With kind of like a little snicker in it. What do you mean he's not? What do you mean he's not breathing? Like, what are you talking about?
Those were the words that an 87-year-old grandmother spoke to her granddaughter when she was asked why her grandson wasn't breathing. Imagine hearing that. Imagine walking into the room and realizing the person you loved most, the brother who hugged you tighter than anyone else, was slumped in a chair and would never wake up again, then turning to your grandmother for answers, only to hear those words. This is not a story about a stranger in the night or a random act of violence. This is the story of Joel David "Bubby" Parks, a 30-year-old disabled man who lived a life overflowing with joy, community, and connection, only to have it all taken away by the very person who had raised him since childhood. His death wasn't an accident, and it wasn't sudden. It was deliberate, it was planned, and it was carried out under the twisted belief that ending his life was somehow an act of mercy. In this video, we are going deep into one of Florida's most disturbing true crime cases and the painful reality that crimes like this happen far more often than most people realize. This is a story about love, betrayal, and the dangerous lie that some lives are less worth living than others. But before we begin, if you find this video interesting, please give it a like at the end and tell me what you think about the case. It really helps the channel. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse, glorify, or condone any of the criminal actions or individuals described in this case. Viewer discretion is advised. Joel David Parks Jr. was born on February 17, 1989, in Bradenton, Florida, to his parents Joel Parks Sr. and Tasha Fretz, and from the very beginning he became the kind of child that people described as light-filled. He had an older sister, Yvonne, whom he affectionately called Bonnie, or sometimes simply Bon, and although their family story would eventually fracture through divorce, what remained constant was the bond between Joel and those closest to him. His father later passed away, his mother eventually remarried a man named James, and Joel and his sister spent much of their upbringing under the care of their grandmother. But through every turn, Joel carried with him a nickname that stuck for life: Bubby. He was the kind of person who earned that kind of affectionate name because he radiated positivity, he never seemed to stop smiling, and he greeted people with warmth that you could feel. Friends and family remembered that if Joel saw you, he would almost certainly give you one of his trademark bear hugs, the kind of embrace that left no doubt you had been hugged. His personality became his signature, but so did his resilience, because Joel lived with a cognitive disability. Some accounts said it was autism, while others pointed to a brain injury from a car accident when he was just an infant, and while the exact cause was never firmly established, what mattered more was that Joel grew up physically healthy, yet needed lifelong support due to his developmental delays. And despite those challenges, Joel did not live in the shadows or retreat into isolation. Instead, he embraced life in his community with both arms, quite literally. He attended the Easter Seals program of Southwest Florida, which was designed to give individuals with disabilities opportunities to thrive and live fuller, more independent lives. According to the CEO of Easter Seals, Tom Waters, Joel would brighten the day of anyone he met. He explained that Joel had this habit of greeting people with a cheerful, "Hi, friend," and then pulling them into a hug so strong you could not help but smile afterwards. Tom described him as one of the happiest people you could ever meet, someone whose presence alone lifted spirits. Joel also volunteered at the Manatee Players, a local performing arts organization, where he became so beloved that he would never leave the building without hugging every single staff member before heading home. And he had another passion that defined him: baseball. He played in the Miracle League, a team designed for individuals with disabilities, and it was there he earned the nickname Home Run Joel. His teammates and coaches remembered how he never stopped improving, how he beamed with pride when he realized his progress, and how the ball field seemed to bring out the very best in him. Jordan Jones, who served as the board chair of the Miracle League, said that when Joel was out on that field, you could see happiness radiating from him, because that was when he was most alive, smiling and growing as an athlete. Joel's life was not confined to programs and leagues, though, because he also took on part-time jobs and found ways to integrate himself into the fabric of his community. He was known at local businesses, remembered by caregivers and co-workers for his joy and kindness, and he gave back through volunteering. He lived in a group home during the week where he received support and supervision, and then he returned to his grandmother's home on weekends, creating a routine that gave him both structure and comfort. That balance allowed him to build independence where he could, while still having the care he needed daily. However, Joel's early childhood was shaped not only by his own challenges, but also by the fractures within his family. When his parents divorced, his mother Tashia found herself struggling financially, and as she tried to hold things together for her children, the responsibility of day-to-day care became overwhelming. It was during this period that custody shifted to Joel's grandmother, Lillian Parks, who was 61 years old at the time. From that point forward, Lillian stepped into the role of primary caregiver, raising both Joel and his sister Yvonne under her roof. And for many years, Lillian was seen as the steady figure in their lives. She had once been a nurse, licensed in Tennessee between the late 1970s and early 1980s. And although her career in healthcare had ended long before she took custody of her grandchildren, that background gave her the knowledge to provide consistent care. She had no criminal record, no hint of trouble with the law, and by all appearances she was a devoted grandmother who dedicated herself to the well-being of Joel and his sister. But as the years went by, Yvonne eventually went to live with her biological mother, while Joel remained in Florida with Lillian. And for more than 2 decades, she managed his routines, ensured he had his medications, and gave him the kind of stability that seemed essential for his development. However, time changed everything, and by 2019, Lillian's health was failing. She was elderly, frail, and scheduled for a hernia surgery that would have required a stay in a nursing home during her recovery. So the question of who would care for Joel during her absence became pressing, and it was here that tensions within the family began to surface. Lillian claimed that Joel was estranged from his mother and that there were no reliable relatives ready to step in, but this was a version of events the family strongly denied. His mother, Tashia, and her husband, James, were living in Ohio, and they insisted that Joel had never been estranged from them. In fact, they argued that they were not only in contact, but preparing to welcome him back to Ohio, and they were deeply hurt by Lillian's claims that she had been the only one willing to look after him. And beyond family arrangements, there was the fact that Joel already had state funding in place, support that guaranteed his long-term care regardless of what happened to his grandmother. By September of 2019, the cracks in Lillian's health were becoming impossible to ignore. She was scheduled for hernia surgery, and she knew that the recovery would leave her in a nursing facility for a time. So she reached out to her granddaughter, Yvonne, in Ohio, and asked her to come down to Bradenton. The request seemed simple enough on the surface: help clean out the apartment, help with Joel during the transition. But what Yvonne did not know then was that her grandmother had already been thinking about something far darker. When Yvonne arrived, she found herself not just tidying up, but helping her grandmother strip the apartment bare. Lillian instructed her to clear out most of the belongings, even the couch and the car, leaving behind only the bedroom furniture. And while it seemed strange, Yvonne obliged because she believed her grandmother was simply preparing for surgery and wanted to make things easier. They still spent that evening together like any other, sitting in the apartment with Joel close by, and nothing in the air felt unusual enough to raise an alarm. The next morning, Saturday, September 21st, Joel followed his familiar routine. He stopped at the local convenience store near his grandmother's home, where he was remembered as cheerful and in good spirits, greeting those he saw just as he always did. He was supposed to play baseball that evening with his Miracle League teammates, where he had earned the nickname Home Run Joel, but he never made it to the field. Instead, that night, Yvonne returned to the apartment after spending the day out with her boyfriend and friends, and she saw what looked like an ordinary scene. Joel was slumped comfortably in the recliner with the television flickering in front of him, and Lillian was resting nearby. Nothing seemed out of place, so she went to bed without a second thought. The next morning, September 22nd, the apartment felt quiet. Yvonne came into the living room and noticed Joel still curled up in the recliner with a blanket draped over him. The television was still on, and at first glance, nothing seemed unusual. She accidentally bumped the chair as she passed, but when Joel didn't stir, she assumed he was simply sleeping in after a late night. It was a Sunday, and there was nothing about the moment that screamed danger, so she let it go and moved on with her day. However, as the hours slipped by, something gnawed at her. Joel remained in the exact same position, the blanket unmoved, his body strangely still. By midday, Yvonne's unease had grown too strong to ignore, so she went back to the recliner and looked more closely. What she saw made her stomach drop. Joel hadn't shifted once. His chest wasn't rising, and his lips looked pale. She turned to her grandmother and said, almost in disbelief, "It doesn't look like he's breathing." Lillian's reply was immediate and chilling. She looked at Yvonne and said, "That's because he's not." The words hit like a blow, but before Yvonne could fully react, Lillian added a second line that froze her in place. "I'm doing us both in. We're going together." In that instant, Yvonne realized the horror of what had happened. Terrified, she left the apartment and called the police. To the neighbors outside, the sight of an ambulance pulling up was hardly surprising. They assumed it must be for the elderly woman inside, but soon they were stunned to learn that the call wasn't about Lillian at all. It was Joel. When officers entered the apartment, they found the 30-year-old lifeless in the recliner, his body already gone for hours. There were no signs of a struggle, no visible injuries, nothing to suggest violence in the physical sense, and yet the scene was just as grim. Lillian lay in her bed nearby, and when officers questioned her, she spoke with a calmness that unsettled them. She admitted plainly that she had given Joel an overdose of prescription pain medication around noon the previous day, and she had taken some pills herself. Her explanation was not confused, nor was it rushed. She told police, "I wanted him to be with me when I go. I put him to sleep, and now he's asleep." Then she added that doctors had told her she had about 5 months left to live, and she did not want Joel to suffer alone after her death. "I didn't want him alone," she said, as if those words were justification enough. Investigators searched the apartment and quickly uncovered evidence that supported her confession. They found a prescription bottle in her name, filled only 5 days earlier with 120 pills, yet when officers counted, only 2 remained. They also recovered multiple letters addressed to family members, each one containing explanations and instructions about what she had done. Among her belongings, they discovered $1,500 set aside, money she had designated to cover cremation costs for herself and Joel together. It was clear that this had not been a sudden act of desperation, but something that had been considered, prepared, and carried out with intent. In the hours that followed Joel's death, the Bradenton Police Department moved quickly to gather evidence and begin interviews, and soon after, they addressed the public. At the press conference, Captain Brian Tier stood before reporters and confirmed what many already feared. Lillian had openly confessed. He admitted she had intentionally overdosed her grandson, and while her words to detectives painted it as an act of mercy born from fear of her own declining health, Captain Brian made it clear that the department saw it for what it was. He said, "It was thought out, it was planned, and she took a human life." However, even as he condemned the act, his tone carried the weight of sympathy. He acknowledged the difficulty detectives faced, because on one hand, there was an elderly woman who claimed she only acted out of worry for her grandson's future care, but on the other hand, there was a cold fact. She had planned it, prepared for it, and carried it out, ending the life of a man who had no choice in the matter. The police emphasized that justice would have to focus on the victim, because regardless of age or intent, a murder had occurred.
Discuss a case from Sunday afternoon. Around noon, Bradenton police responded to the 5100 block of Riverfront Drive in Bradenton. It is an apartment complex for the report of a deceased individual. Upon arrival, officers found 30-year-old Joel Parks deceased in the residence. Joel's grandmother, 87-year-old Lillian Parks, who is his part-time caretaker, made several concerning remarks, spontaneous remarks to the officers, that she had purposely overdosed him with the intent of taking his life. She was concerned about her medical condition and was worried about who would be caring for him in the event that she passed away. Jillian currently is in protective medical custody until she's released by a doctor. And I would like to note that Joel is a disabled adult, unable to care for himself. Joel resided in a group home throughout the week and then would stay with Jillian on the weekends. Joel's parents, his father is deceased, his mother is estranged, and he was discovered by his sister. So at this point in time, charges are pending. We are working with our partners at the state attorney's office to ensure that Jillian Parks, the proper charges are filed, and that she will be taken into custody when she is released from medical care. Are there any questions?
What did she use to overdose him?
There's a lot of things still pending. It's a very active investigation. At this point, we're waiting on some results, one of those being toxicology results. This is a difficult case for our detectives, a difficult case for our agency. Partly, you feel bad for an individual who feels that the only option is to take another human being's life because you're so worried about their care after you're gone. But on the other hand, this is a process where it was thought out, it was planned, and she took a human life. So we are looking at it from a standpoint of she took a human life, and we need to do everything we can to bring justice to his family and his friends. Ms. Parks, and I'd like to clarify, her name is Lillian, not Jillian. I said Jillian earlier, it's Lillian. Ms. Parks is 87 years old.
She's in jail?
No, she's currently in a secure medical facility. There is no threat to the public until she is released by the doctor. Until then, at that point, we will move forward with charging her. You never know what Ms. Parks or a family member, somebody may have said something, somebody knows something. We always put that out there. There's always more to a case. And if anybody knows anything, of course, we put that offer out. The cash reward is through Crime Stoppers, one of our partners, Manatee County Crime Stoppers. You're eligible, if you call in anonymously, you're able to, and the tip pans out, you're able to be eligible for a cash reward.
And what's next with the investigation?
Next investigation is the continuing with the toxicology reports, the medical examiner investigation, and of course moving forward with the state and any charges that we're moving forward with as soon as she's released from that doctor's care.
How are you guys tipped off to this?
It was a sister who found Mr. Parks deceased when when she went to check on him. She found him deceased and called us.
Did she describe Parks' behavior at that moment? What was she doing?
That's still part of the investigation. Interviews are still ongoing even today. We're still meeting with family members as of today and plan to for the remainder of this week. Currently, we are working with the state attorney, so we are gearing towards second-degree murder in this case. You never know totally what someone is thinking. In this case, I don't know if she's thinking about the well-being of her grandson or if she's thinking about herself. I can't answer that question. What we have to look at is the total circumstances, everything surrounding it, and in this case, we can arrive and say that this is a premeditated act where, again, she took the life of another human being. So we take all the other factors out of it. At the end of the day, she took the life of Joel Parks.
However, at that point, toxicology results were still pending, but detectives already suspected a fatal overdose of prescription painkillers. Then came the family's reaction, and it left no room for misunderstanding. Yvonne was devastated and angry, and when she spoke publicly, her words carried the raw grief of someone who had lost her brother in the most unthinkable way. "She took my brother for no reason," Yvonne said. "That's crap." For her, there was no mercy in what Lillian had done, only cruelty and betrayal.
I was headed out to the front door. He goes, "Fine, see you later." I said, "Yes, Debbie." I said, "We'll see you later." I said, "I love you." He goes, "I love you too." And that was the last time I seen him alive.
Yvonne Parks says she spent the day out with her boyfriend and friends. She got back to her grandmother's apartment late Saturday night, saw Lillian Parks and Joel sleeping with the TV on, and thought nothing of it. But at noon the next day, she found it strange to find Joel still asleep.
I said, "Grams," I said, "it doesn't look like he's breathing." And that's when she said, "Clear as day, because he's not." And I said, "What do you mean he's not? Like, what are you talking about?" She goes, "Oh, I'm doing us both and we're going together."
Yvonne says Lillian had a plan. She had asked Yvonne to come to Bradenton to clean out the apartment and take Joel back to Ohio with her.
Because she wasn't sure if she was going to commit or if she was going to go through with having the hiatal hernia surgery and go to a nursing home afterwards.
Bradenton police say Lillian told them she intentionally overdosed Joel because she'd be dying soon and there was no one left to take care of him when she was gone.
You know, for her to say he was estranged from his mother is a big lie.
Joel's mother, Tashia, was equally firm in rejecting Lillian's version of events. She pushed back strongly against her mother's claim that Joel had been estranged from her, calling it a lie. She insisted, "He was never estranged from me. I would have taken him." Tashia explained that she and her husband in Ohio were ready to bring Joel into their home and that plans were already being made for him to leave Florida. For her, Lillian's story, that there had been no other options, was not only false, but insulting.
I have never been estranged from my children by choice. I'd have come and gotten Joel. She had planned 2 weeks prior to that she was going to let Bonnie come and take him back to Ohio.
The family says Joel's death was unnecessary and premeditated, and now this voicemail is the only thing they have left of their bubby.
How are you? Goodbye.
She took my brother for no reason, and to sit there and say that there was no option, that this was the only way she knew how to take care of him. That's crap. Oh, he lit up the room when he walked in the door.
That bright star was 30-year-old Joel Parks. His family called him Bubby.
He goes, "Mommy, I love you. I'll see you later." I said, "I love you too, Bubby. I'll see you later." And that was the last time I seen him.
The next day, Joel's sister was back at her grandmother's home at the Carlton Arms Apartments in Bradenton, where Joel lived part of the time. Yvonne says that's when she noticed Joel slumped over and not looking right.
And I was like, "Grams, it doesn't look like he's breathing." She said, "Because he's not." With kind of like a little snicker in it. "What do you mean he's not? What do you mean he's not breathing? Like, what are you talking about?" "Oh, I'm doing us both in. We're going together."
87-year-old Lillian Parks told police that she purposefully overdosed and killed her grandson because she would not be able to care for him any longer because of her declining health.
His life was snuffed out for nothing.
Joel's family is devastated. His mother, Tasha, says Lillian tried to keep her out of Joel's life.
For her to sit there and just take it, not just away from me, but his siblings, the world that he touched.
Police say Lillian Parks was taken to a medical facility because of her physical condition. They say when she's released, she'll be charged with second-degree murder. But the family says that's not enough.
It was all premeditated. His life was cut way too short. Nothing like this should have ever happened to him.
By September 25th, just days after Joel's death, investigators had gathered enough evidence to secure an arrest warrant for second-degree murder. The decision reflected their view that while this was not a crime of sudden passion, it was still a deliberate act that had taken a life. Lillian remained in medical care under the Baker Act, but the police made it clear that the moment doctors released her, she would be taken into custody. And that moment came on October 4th when she was discharged from the hospital and formally arrested. The frail 87-year-old grandmother was booked into the Manatee County Jail, and the following day she made her initial court appearance. Yet even here, her physical condition dictated how the system treated her. On October 5th, the judge ordered that instead of remaining in jail, she should be placed in a nursing facility while awaiting further proceedings. At first, the charge of second-degree murder stood, but as the case moved forward, prosecutors later reduced it to manslaughter. For Joel's family, this decision felt like another betrayal. They had always believed the act was premeditated, that it had been planned weeks in advance, and they argued it should have been classified as first-degree murder. Reducing it to manslaughter, in their eyes, stripped away the weight of what had actually happened. But the case never reached a trial at all because on January 1st, 2020, barely 3 months after Joel's death, Lillian herself passed away. With her death, the legal process ended abruptly, and the unanswered questions around her motives, her mental state, and even the letters she had left behind went with her. The police never released Joel's full autopsy results, and the notes she had written to her family remained sealed, leaving the public with fragments of the story, but not the whole picture. For the family, it meant there would be no day in court, no testimony, and no formal verdict, only the hollow silence of a case that collapsed before it could be resolved. Joel's community, however, did not let his memory fade quietly. On October 3rd, 2019, just weeks after his death, a celebration of life was held at the Salvation Army in Venice, Florida. Friends, caregivers, and community members gathered to remember him not as a victim, but as Bubby, the smiling man who brought joy to everyone around him. His online obituary is filled with tributes. Co-workers from Chase Bank wrote about his unforgettable smile. A caregiver from Walmart recalled their last cheerful conversation. And friends from the Miracle League baseball program remembered the pride on his face each time he stepped onto the field. But beyond personal grief, Joel's story became part of a wider and darker conversation. Disability rights advocates pointed to research from the Ruderman Family Foundation, which estimated that on average, one disabled person in the United States is killed every single week by a caregiver or family member, and they reminded the public that these figures were likely undercounted because many cases were either not reported or the victim's disability was never disclosed. To understand the full weight of this tragedy, some looked back at history. In Nazi Germany, the so-called T4 program oversaw the mass killing of over 200,000 disabled people under the guise of mercy. In the United States, echoes of that mindset persisted for decades, with forced sterilizations of more than 65,000 disabled Americans across 30 states. sanctioned by courts and justified by false ideas of burden and mercy. Those attitudes had not entirely disappeared, and advocates warned that they still shaped the way modern society and even courts responded to these crimes. And in Joel's case, the parallels were clear. Courts often show leniency in so-called mercy killings, framing them as acts of compassion rather than violence. But when you stripped away the excuses, what remained was a man whose life had been deliberately ended despite the fact that he had support, he had family, and he had resources. This was not mercy. This was premeditated murder, cloaked in the language of sacrifice. So what do you think about this case? Do you believe that responsibility rests solely on Lillian? Or do you think others, family members, or even the wider system, share in the blame? And what about the broader issue of so-called mercy killings, where caregivers decide that ending a dependent's life is somehow acceptable? We'd love to hear your perspective. Share your thoughts in the comments because every voice matters here, and I can assure you that we read every single one of them. And who knows, your comment might help someone else reflect on the hidden realities of these cases. If you found this story important, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into cases like this one. Until next time, cheers